Thanks for staying with us and welcome to those who might be joining us at this moment. As stated earlier on, this captivating episode of the program, we're going to be addressing the attainment of social justice through water security and restructured education. We have a brilliant lineup for you today, and joining me right here in our Abuja studio is Mr. Hamza Yunusa, a water tech entrepreneur and a leading advocate for sustainable water management practices in Nigeria. He is the CEO of Hydronamics. In the same vein, we would also be having connecting with us virtually from Lagos, Nigeria, Mr. Osita Oparugo, a lawyer, project development consultant, and a techpreneur who doubles as the founder of Getbundi, a government-approved educational technology platform. You guys, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks. It's a pleasure to always have somebody like you in person in the studio to speak on issues like this. Mr. Oparugo, can you hear me?
Yes, please. I can hear you very well. Thank you for having me.
All right. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Let's get straight to the matter. We have very limited time, but we have beautiful questions to ask and answer. All right. I'll start with you, Mr. Yunusa. Let's ask you, what really do we mean, when we say we want to attain social justice through security, and how do we ensure, that equitable access to clean and safe water for all communities in the country is attained, considering our disparities and all our differences?
Well, first of all, if you talk about water security, you're talking about three fundamental factors. For example, one of them is too much water, too little water, and poor quality water. So if you talk about too much water, you're talking about a situation where you have floods. So if you want to attain water security, you have to put down infrastructure to ensure that things like this do not happen. Too little water, you have to combat water shortages, especially in the rural areas, places that are hard to reach, and even urban slums, places like that. You have to look into issues like that. And thirdly, poor quality water. You're talking about rural areas where the water is not potable. You have to purify. So essentially, in situations like this, you have to deploy water treatment technologies that are customizable and scalable in these communities. So if you put all of these factors together, easily you can attain water security.
That's a beautiful one. I mean, it's your forte, so I can see you're ready to go. Okay, let me stay with you and just ask you this.
Yeah.
What innovative solutions can be implemented, to tackle the challenges of this water security and, contamination, particularly marginalized regions? And also, if you can, answer for us, how does investing in water security, directly contribute to Nigeria's economic growth?
Good question. So I'll start with contamination in the water supply systems. In rural communities that are hard to reach or are remote and do not have, a conventional water treatment and supply systems, you have to deploy technologies that are, first of all, local, that are efficient and scalable. So in 2018, we developed a water purification system called the Filter X360. It removes bacteria, viruses, protozoans, and clears turbidity from any given sample of fresh water. And we piloted it at the Rochers Foundation College in Owerri. Very beautiful, scalable. You can deploy it in rural communities, and it is also movable. So it makes it very, very dynamic. You need solutions like this to combat contamination in the rural areas. And secondly, if you talk about the urban communities, the major problem we're having as regards to water distribution and equity in the water supply system is coming from the politicians. Politicians promise people that you're going to have free water and all of that, and that is not sustainable. They do all of that because they want to win elections. That's understandable, but unfortunately, people are becoming disadvantaged. In the long run, the water utilities are not financially viable to maintain their infrastructure and expand to underserved areas. So essentially, you have to have a system whereby the water utilities have a cost-reflective tariff system. They charge for water, they produce water and distribute, and people have to pay for it. And this is the core of our strategy and activities at Hydronamics. We have developed technologies, and that's why we say that we're the leading water technology company in Nigeria. Technologies that help you...
You might have to pay me for that advice, but it's okay. Go ahead. But I was going to ask, we're talking about money now. I wanted to ask, before I come to Mr. Oparugo quickly, the people are saying they don't have enough money. but we're still going to charge them. How do we balance that out?
So that's the irony, because we are saying people don't have enough money to pay for water, but they are buying bottled water. I'll give you an example. In Abuja, it costs 110 naira to buy 1 cubic meter of water from the municipal water supply system. That's 1,000 liters for 100 naira. One bottled water costs you 200, 500, depending on where you are. So it's actually much more expensive to buy water from alternative sources than to buy it from the water utility. So that's the irony.
Right.
We have to push for investment in the water infrastructure systems so that people have access to pipe-borne water. At the end of the day, it's cheaper and it is more sustainable.
All right, thank you. Let's go now to Mr. Okparogo. Let's take it from education. Let's ask you, how do you, implement, improvements in educational infrastructure, such that they are aligned to social justice and, ensure that every child in Nigeria has access to quality education, regardless of their social class?
So there are so many things, right? There are so many things that we need to look at. We need to look at if you have to have an all-inclusive education in a country like Nigeria. Sadly, there are so many of them. We need to look at resource allocation. The allocation need to be, the resource need to be allocated evenly. It doesn't matter where you are. You're not going to say, okay, we give more priority to the schools in the township or in the rural areas. It has to be evenly allocated so that people even in your remote areas will have access to quality education. You need to look at teacher training. The schools in our rural areas do not have the qualified teachers to teach in those communities, and that's a problem. And then again, you also need to look at curriculum inclusivity. Sometimes you ask yourself, oh, they are on WAEC curriculum. Oh, it is a British curriculum. Oh, it is a Canadian curriculum. That now divides education. And this now brings a very strong divide among the rich and the poor. And that, of course, affects those in the rural communities. And you need to also look at the scholarship program. These are all issues that we need to look at if you have to have an all-inclusive education throughout Nigeria. But one thing I will point out at this stage is this. One factor that needs to be looked at and looked at critically is the curriculum inclusivity. The curriculum has to change, considering the fact that post-primary education, for instance, is the last schooling most Nigerians will receive. So the curriculum must change and must teach towards STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If you incorporate this into the post-primary education, considering, of course, what I have just said, that is the last schooling most Nigerians will receive. So if they have a STEM-enabled curriculum, then they will join the workforce when they finish the secondary school system and be able to complement whatever other skill sets that exist in the workforce space. Right. So it's not like one over the other. These are a comprehensive issues that has to be looked at.
That's very well said, Mr. Okparogo. Staying with you, please explain to us, this whole inclusivity that we're talking about, how inclusive, and that accessible education, when you're using STEM, how can it reduce these inequalities? Because you just mentioned the divide between the rich and the poor. How really can this be effected? Because sometimes you begin to ask the question, is it true? Is it possible that the divide between the rich and the poor can really be bridged, in looking at our country today?
Yes. So one thing you have to now look at this stage, right? One thing you have to look at this stage is the technology. Technology is the only thing that can reduce the divide, So when you now talk about technology, what are we going to be looking at? Then we now look at platforms like the Getbundi. When you have in Nigeria, maybe you don't know, and I can tell you now, there are no secondary schools in 5,000 communities within trackable distance in Nigeria. 5,000 communities. no secondary schools. Okay, so how can you bridge this divide? Then that's where technology comes in. That's where a platform like Getbundi, what we operate, comes in.
Yes.
Because we can send education to the remotest part of Nigeria. And then again, when we talk about curriculum that is STEM embedded, this is what we have also done successfully and piloted it in Lagos State in partnership with Lagos State government at Wesley Girls Secondary School in Yaba. And we have proven to Lagos State government and then of course to people who have witnessed the pilot that technology access, internet access will go a long way in bridging the divide in education equity in Nigeria.
All right, I'm gonna hold you up for there. Just let's take a pause, and we're going to come back to involving technology in our education system. It's very key that we speak about that. We're going to be taking a quick break now, and when we return, we'll be looking at the intersection of water security, restructured education, and technology, like we just said. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Welcome back. You're watching Channels Beam, coming to you live from our studio in Abuja. Hamza Yunusa and Osita Okparugo are our guests, and we're still exploring the attainment of social justice through water security and restructured educational system. I would like to come back to you, Mr. Yunusa. You see, we need to talk about water in the light of which we see things happening. I mean, we're just watching the synopsis, how it's a problem there within the South-South, and we know it's not just a South-South problem. So I'm going to ask you, how do issues of water security intersect with dimensions of social justice, such as gender equality, the rights for minority groups, in the context of Nigeria as we know it today, and what measures can be taken to address them, these challenges that we face?
All right. So the fundamental thing that needs to be done in the sector is investment. So the World Bank has said Nigeria needs to invest about $3 billion annually in the water sector, from now till 2030 to attain water, security and equity and all of that. So essentially, that's the issue. There is no investment in the sector. That is why people that are poor, people that are vulnerable, do not have access to this very, very important resource. If you invest, for example, what we just saw earlier in the synopsis, that community requires, even if it's a packaged water treatment plant, because they have water, they have abundant water, they have fresh water there. You can just collect that water, put it through a purification process, pipe it to everybody to their homes. But most importantly, the water must not be free, because it costs a lot of money to produce this water and distribute it. So people have to pay for it. And when this is done, every single individual, both the rich and the poor, will have access to water. And then if you talk about, girls, gender equality and all of these things, I saw in the synopsis that people have to trek long distances to get water. Imagine a 12, 15-year-old girl trekking long distances in a very quiet road that is bushy and all of that. The dangers that are there, we're talking about rape, we're talking about attack by wild animals and a whole lot of things, snakes and all of these things. So if you are able to provide, the infrastructure, this resource will be abundant and it will be available. But most importantly, we have to ensure that we don't waste it.
All right, beautiful. Coming to you, Mr. Barugo, I'm going to ask you now, what measures can we take, to address specific challenges that we're facing, when it comes to restructuring education, when it comes to including STEM in our educational system properly? And then how does this also tie into social justice? How does all we're talking about in the educational restructuring, how does it tie into social justice? That's what we want to know now.
So very simple, right? You have to look at what have we done before? Where are we with what we have done? And where do we want to go? If you look at it, you will see completely that what we have done before has not worked. Why has it not worked? It has not worked because we have left STEM out of the school curriculum in Nigeria. So there has to be a conscious effort made by stakeholders to first redesign, rejig, the Nigerian post-primary education curriculum by including STEM. If you do that, then you now begin to look at ways to massify this STEM when you now talk about social justice. What social justice, what you are talking about, the encompassing of everything you're talking about, it's the equitable distribution, equitable allocation, equitable provision of education. How can that be achieved? That can be achieved if you use technology. Without the use of technology, you cannot equitably distribute the resources or allocate education across a country like Nigeria. Because we have to now look at those in the remote areas that do not have access. They do not have access to education. Why don't they have access to education? Maybe because the distance, maybe because there are no infrastructures, maybe because there are no qualified teachers. All these things come together is what technology can now bridge. So you can use technology to send education. I mean, look at what technology is doing. You sit in Abuja, in your channel's office, I sit in my office in Lagos, and we are talking. So can you sit in my village in Mbierin, Bitoli local government, or you sit in Zamfara, and we sit here and we send you education, quality education. What are the problems with education in Nigeria?
All right.
Three problems.
Okay, go ahead. Quickly there.
The issue of cost, access, and quality. If you look at policies that will look at how to bridge the issues of cost, quality, and access and distribute it evenly, education will get to everywhere, every nook and cranny of this country. So we need to first reject the STEM curriculum or reject our post-primary education curriculum to include STEM. We now need to look at how to use technology to bridge the divide in education across the country. All
right, gentlemen, that's where we're going to be calling the wrap today. That's a beautiful way to put it. Like, I wish we can have so much more time. Thank you, Mr. Parago, for joining us from Lagos. Thank you very much. Mr. Yunus, thank you very much for joining us. I'm hoping we can have this conversation again. Absolutely. Definitely. We're going to have more time, some other time, to speak about these things and see where we have grown from here. So after we have discussed, right? Okay, that's our time on Channels Beam for today. Thank you very much for staying tuned. We'll be leaving you with our top 5 most viewed videos of the week.